If it's okay with everybody, we're going to learn today about the Mitzvah of Tefillin. And again, we're learning from the Sefer Hegyonei Halacha, but the first three volumes of Hegyonei Halacha address the Moadim. And now we're in a period of time between the Moadim and Chanukah. So I think it's a little premature to learn Hegyonei Halacha on Chanukah. Last time we spoke a little bit about Geshamim. Maybe we'll continue on that too. But I want to introduce to you a fourth volume of the Hegyonei Halacha, which is called, I don't know if you could read it, Hegyonei Halacha U'Drasha. And it's on the Magal HaChaim, meaning on the whole circle of life. So he has a lot about Bris Milah and chapters about marriage. And he has chapters for a bar mitzvah boy about tefillin. And I feel myself as if I'm a bar mitzvah boy because I put on tefillin every day. And I very rarely get an opportunity to study more about tefillin. So I think for the next, at least today and next week, I'm assuming next week we start at 3:15 on the Israel clock. You'll be back on the same clock in Toronto as we are here in Yerushalayim. And we'll have two lectures, maybe even a third, on tefillin. We'll see how it goes. It's just a really new, shall I say, experiment for myself. Okay, then? So the chapter we're looking at begins on page 145, and I believe that David was kind enough to send it out. I hope it came out clearly. In the past, for the first three volumes of Hegyonei Halacha, David has the original. This volume he doesn't have. So I tried to take the photographs and send it to him. My level of photography is very low, but hopefully it's legible. Very often David will—
It's very legible.
He'll say to me, Rabbi Brozan, send it again because I can't read it.
It's very legible.
We go now to a parsha at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, actually the 7th chapter of Sefer Dvarim in Parshas Vaschanan, and we're familiar with this pasuk from Kriyat Shema that we recite twice a day, and it says, "Ukshartem lios al yodecha, vayulu totafos bein einecha." Chazal understand that we have to tie down the tefillin. It says ukshartem, and al yodecha is read to be interpreted as yad keha, the weaker hand. So we're tying down with the stronger hand. Let's say if I'm a righty, I'm using the right hand to tie down my tefillin al yodecha yad keha on the weaker hand, which is the left hand. A lefty, on the other hand, will tie down the tefillin onto his right arm, because that right arm is called Yodcha, it's Yad Keha for him. If somebody's ambidextrous, then l'chora he may have two choices. But the halacha gets very, very nuanced and specific. It's not for us today. What is considered a righty? What's considered a left hand? You have people who write with one hand, they'll throw a ball with a different hand, and so forth and so on. But be that as it may, the emphasis here is on the word ukshartem. But that's with regard to tefillin shel yad, and the kshira is done onto the yad keha, the weaker hand. But then we get to the second part of this pasuk, which is the mitzvah of the shel rosh. Does the Torah say to put tefillin on your head? Doesn't say that. It says vayu totafos bein einecha, and Chazal understood it's keneged bein einecha. You draw a line from the middle of the two eyes up to the top, the beginning of the head, and that's going to be the tefillin shel rosh. Notice that al pi pshuto shel mikra, the Torah doesn't mention anything about kshira with regard to the tefillin shel rosh. It only says kshira with regard to the tefillin shel yad. So the mitzvah of a maisa kshira to tie down the tefillin to one's body applies to the shel yad, but not necessarily to the shel rosh, unless we want to interpret it that the word ukshartem at the beginning of the pasuk goes liel and milarai, goes in both directions, and therefore even the shel rosh is included in ukshartem, which could be a possibility. I'm not denying it, but simple, straightforward pshat would be that the mitzvah of ukshartem is specifically limited to the shel yad. And we'll see about this as we go along. The one who really plows through this and navigates through this whole distinction between shel rosh and shel yad is none other than the Rogatchover Gaon. We'll speak about the Rogatchover a little bit later on. But let's go slowly, following the presentation of Rav Yitzchak Mirsky in the Hegyonei Halacha. He says the following: how many mitzvahs do we have here in this one single pasuk? As you know, the Rishonim were called Monei mitzvahs. We have the Rambam who counted mitzvahs. We have before him the Rav Saadia Gaon, the Rasag. We have contemporaries of the Rambam that counted the mitzvahs. Everybody agrees, based on the Gemara at the end of Makos, that the magical number is 613. But how to arrive at 613 is always going to be an issue. And if one Rishon will count one mitzvah as two mitzvahs, then he has to subtract another mitzvah. If another Monei mitzvah will count two mitzvahs as one mitzvah, he's got to add another mitzvah. So that's the juggling of minyan mitzvahs. How many mitzvahs do we have in Tefillin? On the one hand, it's only one pasuk. On the other hand, there are two separate actions over here. There's the action of putting the tefillin on the shel rosh and the action of putting the tefillin on shel yad. And in truth, everybody agrees that aim tefillin shel achas ma'keves b'tefillin shel chavrata. If you only have one tefillin, whether it be the shel rosh, you'll put on the shel rosh. Whether it be the shel yad, you'll put on the shel yad. And logically, based on the fundamental principles of the shroshim, the roots of the Rambam to say for mitzvahs, when you have two dimensions of a mitzvah and each one stands on its own independently, that means einon ma'akvo zu et zu, we count them as two mitzvahs. And don't be surprised if I tell you that there are Rishonim, amongst them the Rambam himself, who calculates in Tefillin two different mitzvahs. Mitzvah Aseh Yud Aleph is Tefillin Shel Rosh. Mitzvah Aseh Yud Beis is Tefillin Shel Rosh, and Mitzvah Aseh Yud Gimel is Tefillin Shel Yad. Why did the Rambam count it as two mitzvahs? But the simple answer to that would be that Eino Ma'akvo Zu et Zu. And at this point, I'll just tell you over a story that I'm sure you've heard. There's a gemach for Tefillin in Yerushalayim. They buy tefillin for young orphans who cannot afford a pair of tefillin. And the story is told, it took place many years ago, maybe 20, 25 years ago, that one fine morning day, the gabbai of the gemach for tefillin finds a check in an envelope with no, there's no name that this is from so-and-so, send me a receipt. A check for the gemach for tefillin to the sum total of, are you ready for this? 20 grand American, $20,000. And the gabbai had never seen a sum of money for the gemach for tefillin in Yerushalayim at that number. And how do we track this guy down? Find out why and how to give him thanks and make him the guest of honor at our next dinner. And he didn't leave any information, but they had a signature on the check. And they worked overtime until they were able, through the bank, to identify this individual. They call him up and they ask him if he would bother coming down to the gemach to explain why he left such a humongous sum of money as a contribution to the gemach. And I'm sure you all know the answer. This man was in the Shoah. He went from camp to camp over the course of 4, maybe even 5 years without tefillin. The Nazis had zero toleration for tefillin, as you know, as they did for any mitzvah. He was in a Hungarian camp, apparently, and he was freed from the camp by the American soldiers. And there were 2 lines being formed by those inmates, if you want to call them that, the Nitzolei Shoah, that were as thin as a finger. One line was the American soldiers were giving out candies. And the other line was because there was one inmate, one Yid, who had a Tefillin Shel Yad that he somehow carried through the Holocaust and hid from the Nazis. And Jews were lining up to wear the tefillin, to make a bracha on tefillin for the first time in years. And this individual, who is the hero of our story, was online to get chocolate from the American soldiers until his buddy said to him, when was the last time you put on tefillin? There's a line over here to put on tefillin. Maybe you should join me, which he did. And with tears in his eyes, he puts on tefillin for the first time in his life. When he gets back to the other line, waiting now for chocolate, his buddies were dead on the ground. Many of them had just perished, not knowing that the body cannot tolerate chocolate after not having eaten for years or months or whatever it is. So the tefillin saved his life, and he decided that he would dedicate some of his funds, if Hashem would ever give him the such, to the mitzvah of tefillin. An amazing story. But keep in mind, he only had tefillin shel yad. But as we said before, ein tefillin ma'ak v'zu'utzu, whatever you have, you put on the tefillin. So the Rambam paskins, based on this compelling logic, that there are two mitzvahs in Taryag. One is the tefillin shel rosh, number Yud Gimel, and the other is the tefillin shel yad, number Yud Dal. I'm sorry, I keep getting the same. Yud Beis. The Smag, the Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos, also counts tefillin as two mitzvahs. However, the Bahag, the Baal Halachas Gedolos, who predates the Rambam, as well as the Sefer Yereim of Rabbi Elazar Mimetz, one of the great Ashkenazic Rishonim of the Bali Tosfos, who is more or less a contemporary of the Rambam, they both count tefillin shel rosh and tefillin shel yad as one single mitzvah. Obviously, because they're written together in one pasuk, they're all called one mitzvah tefillin. And these are two parts, two segments of one single mitzvah. There's no reason to count them as two separate mitzvahs. Even if one is not ma'akiv in the other, we still count it as one mitzvah because it's all part of one entity, one mitzvah of tefillin. I mean, if I could say, Mashal Amad Domer, we have Shittas and Rishonim that in Sfiras HaOmer, if you miss a day, you could still salvage the next day. And we have other Rishonim who say that every day is ma'akev. And yet, even though every day is ma'akev, and if you miss one day, you miss the entire entity of Sfiras HaOmer, nevertheless, we can count it as one mitzvah. We have other Rishonim who will say, let's count Sfiras HaOmer as 49 separate mitzvahs. And even though those Rishonim who count Sfiras HaOmer as one mitzvah, they agree that every single counting is a separate entity, but nevertheless, it's all part and parcel, integrated into one whole, which is called Sfiras HaOmer. And likewise, according to the Smag and the Sefer Yereim, both Tefillin shel rosh and Tefillin shel rosh are segments of one mitzvah, and can be fulfilled independent of the other mitzvah, so you can count every night of Sfiras HaOmer as a separate entity, even if you miss another night, according to that shita. And yet, we're going to count it as one mitzvah, because even though every segment of the mitzvah, whether it's shel yad or shel rosh, can stand on its own independent, nevertheless, they're two parts of a whole. And there's one entity, which is called the mitzvah tefillin, has two parts to it, and each part stands on its own, but it's one entity. It's one mitzvah of tefillin. The Ramban says, in his commentary on Sefer Mitzvahs, in defense of the Bahag, who maintains that there's only one mitzvah, Tefillin shel rosh and Tefillin shel yad inyan echadu. It's one kiyum. It's two parts of a coin. Two parts of a whole. The kol mashe kosim v'shel yad kosim v'shel rosh. Whatever it says in the shel yad, it says true for the shel rosh. And that is the Torah, in a very atypical way, gives us the underlying reasoning for tefillin. Leman tia Torah Hashem b'finu. And what does it mean? Tia Torah Hashem befinu. We take the Torah Hashem and the parchments and we put it on two parts of the human body. We put it on the Yad Keneged HaLev and on the Rosh Keneged HaNeshama VaSeichel. We get the Seichel of the Adam, the intellect in the head, together with the heart of the emotions that motivate man, and we put them together and integrate them into one whole. The mitzvah Tefillin is basically to surround the entire human body with Torah Hashem. What does it mean? Should we put Tefillin and Torah Hashem on every single aver in the body? No. We choose the most important, most profound avarim in the body. One is for the moach, for the intellect, and the other is for the lev, the emotions. And the intellect and the emotions both form one whole of Laman Tia Torah Hashem Beficha. And therefore, says Ramban, the Bahag is perfectly justified to integrate both Shal Yad and Shal Rosh as one entity, one mitzvah. Laman Tia Torah Hashem Beficha. That pasuk refers not only to the Torah of Tefillin Shal Yad, and also refers to the Tefillin Shal Rosh, and the Parshiyos of Torah are written in both the Batim of Shal Rosh, the Batim of Shal Yad. They both combine and integrate to form an entity of surrounding the body with Torah Hashem. And these two Avarim were singled out, Keneged HaLev, Keneged HaRosh. Those are the two parts of one entity, of the body being surrounded. I don't know, maybe the word surrounded doesn't do justice. It's more than just surrounded. It's almost as if you penetrated into the body. Chazal speak about tefillin, not ala rosh, but birosh, which literally means that tefillin are in your head. I mean, again, if you put the tefillin in your head, you'll probably die. But what it means in your head means it's got to be integrated into your very soul, into your very personality, both through the lev and through the moach. And this is the entity of the entire human organism, the entire human being, who is now being uplifted by the Kedushas HaTefillin, both Shal Rosh and Shal Yad, as one entity in which the body is considered uplifted and sanctified by the Kedushas HaTefillin. It's one mitzvah l'mantia, Torah Hashem b'ficha. And moving on to the second page, which I've numbered as 146, we come back to the Rambam Shita that there are two separate mitzvahs to be counted in Taryag, Shal Rosh, Shal Yad. You could have one without the other. And now, Olenu Lachkar, on the second line from the top, Ma'u Gufa Shal Mitzvah. When I see the word Lachkar, I get very excited. My eyes light up. Because what you get now is a Lamdisha Yeshivisha Chakira. A Chakira means there are two ways of defining something. And what we're going to see here, based on the Hegyonei Halacha, is that there are two possible definitions of the mitzvah Tefillin. And depending upon which definition you take, you accept, you will conclude one way or the other as to whether Tefillin is one mitzvah or two mitzvahs. The challenge here in this Chakira is matching. What do I mean by matching? You'll have two definitions of Tefillin, the mitzvah Gufa Shal Mitzvah Tefillin. We'll call it A and B. And now you have two possibilities as to whether we have two mitzvahs, and Shal Rosh and Shal Yad are counted separately as two independent mitzvahs, or one mitzvah, one entity. That machlokus between the Rambam on the one side and the Bahag on the other side will depend upon which side in the Chakir, which definition of Tefillin you want to accept. So I made a little diagram. I don't know if you got that. My own chicken scratch. But let's see the Chakira in its full glory. And I'm going to challenge the Olam to see if you can do the matching. One definition of the mitzvah of tefillin is the Ma'aser mitzvah. The act of, in fancy English, donning tefillin, meaning placing the tefillin on your body. That's a Ma'aser mitzvah. The Torah says, "Ukshartem," put the tefillin on. And the other definition is no. The mitzvah of tefillin essentially is having tefillin on your body. It's not the donning of the tefillin, but rather the wearing of the tefillin. And in the second definition, the Ma'aser Kshira, the act of putting the tefillin on, is just a hechsher mitzvah. It's a prelude. It's a preliminary stage. It's a technical necessity in order to get the body to have tefillin on it. But the mitzvah is not the putting the tefillin on, but rather having the tefillin on the body. And now the matching is up to you. Do we have, we're learning now a little bit about Nidarim and Nidavis in Masechta Nidarim. I need a Nidav over here. I need a volunteer to try to come forward and tell me how, again, without cheating. If you read it already, then it's already papal and you already saw the answer. But if you could cover the sefer, then come up with a matching. Who would hold what? Meaning, in the Rambam's reference, there are two mitzvahs. He could hold either the mitzvahs, the Ma'aser mitzvah of Kshira, or having the tefillin on your body. Which one is appropriate? And then if you get to the Bahag, who holds there's only one mitzvah, and we integrate tefillin shel yad with tefillin shel rosh, which definition is he operating with? Is it a mitzvah of Ma'aser Kshira, or is it a mitzvah of having the tefillin on your body? I see Joe's raising his hand.
Well, I would have to say, obviously, that according to the Rambam, it's got to be Ma'aser mitzvah because he's making it into two, because you're doing two actions.
Excellent. Let's go the other way around, Joe. I'm going to come back to what you said in just a minute. Let's start with the Bahag. What definition of tefillin, of the mitzvah of tefillin, is the Bahag who counts them as one mitzvah? What is he operating with? Which assumption, which premise about the definition of tefillin was accepted by the Bahag that led him to the conclusion that we should count the two as one single mitzvah?
Mitzvah's only on the wearing, just on the having it on you.
The body has to wear tefillin. Now you could ask me, where in the body should I put the tefillin? On my nose, my elbows, my knees? Where in the body? So the Torah says you want the tefillin on your body, make sure they're on your heart and on your head. Those are the two main parts of your body. The organism of a human being is made up of two primary elements: the element of mind, of rosh, and the element of heart, and the yad shel yad is connected to the heart. The totality of the organism of the human being to be enwrapped, or shall I say, surrounded by tefillin, by the Torah of tefillin, is made up of these two organs, and you need the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh, but it's one entity. But if you look at the mitzvah of tefillin as a mitzvah of Ma'aser, then you have two different Ma'aser. You have one Ma'aser of hanochas tefillin shel yad, and another Ma'aser of hanochas tefillin al rosh. They're two Ma'aser mitzvahs. So that we have the following conclusion. The issue of whether to count tefillin as one indivisible entity, one mitzvah, or two mitzvahs as two separate independent mitzvahs, really hinges on what your definition of tefillin is. Is tefillin a Ma'aser mitzvah, or the Ma'aser mitzvah is just a hechsher? It's just a mechanism, a means to an end, but the end is to have your tefillin on your body. And here, my friends, we're ready for the Rogatchover. Everybody knows him as the Rogatchover. His name is Rav Yosef Rosen. He came from the town of Rogatchover. As a baby, he was considered a genius of geniuses. They used to say about the Rogatchover what they say about me and some of the members of my family. You could have made two Einsteins out of him. In fact, the Rogatchover was called the Sar HaTorah because he knew the entire Torah. Don't fool yourself. When you say you do a Daf Yomi and you're in the 7th round of Daf Yomi because 7 times you did Shas, don't fool yourself. Daf Yomi is made up of 2/3 of Shas. And 2/3 of Shas is probably 0.001% of Torah. The Rogatchover knew it all. Zohar and Arizal. He knew Pnimius HaTorah and Sodei HaTorah. He knew Shas backwards and forwards. He knew Yerushalmi in his sleep. He knew Sifra, Sifri, Tosefta, Mechilta. You name it, the Rogatchover knew it. And he was famous because when he learned Chavrusa at the age of 8 with Reb Chaim Brisker, because from Brisk to Rogatchover was not very far. So Reb Chaim used to say there are 2 aspects, and the Rogat used to say there are 3 aspects. That was at the age of 8. That's what they were debating, whether it's Tzvei Dinim or Drei Dinim. In any event, the Rogatchover says that these 2 definitions of Tefillin are from one perspective, they're both correct. The Maisa Mitzvah and having a Tefillin on your body. But it all depends what you're talking about. Are you talking about Tefillin Shel Yad? Or are you talking about Tefillin Shel Rosh? And he says, read the pasuk carefully. With regard to Tefillin Shel Yad, the Torah says, Ukshartem. The mitzvah is kshira, meaning hanacha. The act of putting the tefillin on. But when the Torah in the Sefer of the pasuk gets the Tefillin Shel Rosh, it doesn't say Ukshartem, but it says V'hayu l'totofos b'neinecha. What is V'hayu? They should be on your body. B'neinecha. It's the wearing of the tefillin, not the putting on the tefillin, that defines the essence of Tefillin Shel Rosh. And from the perspective of the Rogatchover, which you'll see here on the bottom of your page 146, the second page that I sent to you, he says that Mikan hachiluk bein Tefillin Shel Rosh l'Tefillin Shel Yad, but Tefillin Shel Yad ikar mitzvah akshira. And therefore we will make the bracha over lasiyosan. Before we put on the Tefillin Shel Yad, we're already reciting the bracha on the hanacha. After the hanacha, it's too late. But the Shel Rosh, ikar mitzvah sheyeh munachim al rosho, that they're on his head. It would seem to me, and I may be wrong about this, that according to the Rogatchover, the Rambam is 100% correct. You've got to count Tefillin Shel Yad and Shel Rosh as 2 separate mitzvahs because they are essentially 2 different mitzvahs. It's not the same mitzvah. If the Torah had said V'hayu al yodecha or Ukshartem Keneged Einecha, applying both the Maisa Mitzvah Kshira to Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, or the V'hayu that they're on your body in both Shel Rosh but also in Shel Yad, then you could count it as one mitzvah. But if you're talking about essentially 2 different mitzvahs, in Shel Rosh, according to the Rogatchover, the donning of the tefillin is just a hechsher. It's not even part of the mitzvah. It's not the gufa shel mitzvah. And we'll see how the Rogatchover is going to prove it. But in Shel Yad, the act of putting on the tefillin is the ma'aseh mitzvah, the essential mitzvah act. It's not a hechsher mitzvah, it's the gufa shel mitzvah. She told about 2 mitzvahs that are essentially different, one from the other. And they therefore should be counted as 2. In the footnote here, he brings the Ramban. The Ramban was asking, why is it that in Lavan and Tcheles, 2 parts in the mitzvah of tzitzis, the Rambam counts them as one mitzvah, mitzvah Yudal. And even though Eino ma'achvin said. So you could have tzitzis of tchelis, you could have tzitzis of lavan. You don't have both. You'll wear one. And the Rambam counts it as one mitzvah. As we said before, you could have two parts of a mitzvah, of a single mitzvah, that are not machvazut. Each segment stands on its own, and yet they integrate to form one mitzvah. We've seen that in the case of tzitzis. Why shouldn't the Rambam therefore be consistent? And just like in tzitzis, he paskins that tcheles and lavan are one mitzvah, he counts it only as one mitzvah in taryag. Mitzvah Yudalid, why is it that in mitzvos, Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, he's got Yud Beis as Tefillin Shel Rosh, Yud Gimel as Tefillin Shel Yad? And I believe that the counter argument against the Ramban and his analogy between Tefillin and tzitzis is this Rogatsham. But Mursky goes on a slightly different pathway, but I think we could say that's really the Rogatsham. The Rogatsham is telling you that unlike in tzitzis, where the same identical action will govern both tchelis and lavan, there's no difference between the two. In Tefillin, there's a difference between shal yad and shal rosh. It's not just that eino ma'ak v'zu'azu. Eino ma'ak v'zu'azu, the Ramban is correct, that applies even in tchelis and lavan. But yet Tefillin, yet tzitzis is one mitzvah. But in Tefillin, it's much more than eino ma'ak v'zu'azu. That might be a technicality. But fundamentally, essentially, they're two separate mitzvahs. One is a Maisik Shira, and the other is V'hayu Alavavcha. Even without a Maisik Shira. And if you need a Shira, it's only a technicality, it's a mechanics, and it's a means to an end. Not so in Tefillin Shel Yad. Tefillin Shel Yad, the Torah is explicit, outspoken. It's Kshartem. It's the Maisa Hanocha. Hence, you have to count them as two separate mitzvahs, which has nothing to do with tzitzis at all. He says here, Al teshivenu shebetfilin shnei ma'asim v'al kein nimnu b'shtayim. Don't, says the Ramban, don't defend the Rambam by saying, well, they're two different actions. They have to be counted separately as two separate mitzvahs. Tzitzis is one action, whether it's tcheles or lavan, it's one beged, he puts it on with one maisa atifa, levisha. Shrei kriya shma shel arvis, u kriya shma shel shachar. Aren't those two maisa? And yet, the Rambam counts them as one mitzvah. Korno sam b'shnei zmanim. Korno sam b'shnei kriyos. Umikol makom harambam mona osam es mitzvah achas is one mitzvah kriyat shma. So don't tell me that in Tefillin he was forced to count Tefillin as two mitzvahs because they're two separate ma'asim. In Kriya Shema for sure it's two separate ma'asim. Kriya Shema in the morning, Kriya Shema in the afternoon, in the evening, and yet the Rambam counts it as one mitzvah. But the answer is that essentially, whether it's Tcheles or Lavan, whether it's Kriya Shema Shel Shachar or Tefillah Shel Arvis, it's always going to be the same mitzvah. It's Kriyas Hashma, morning and evening, but Kriyas Hashma. It's Levishas HaTzitzis, whether it be Lavan or Tcheles. Masha Ein came in Tefillin, we're talking about Maisa Hanocha in Shel Yad, and having the Tefillin on your body in the case of Shel Rosh. And moving on to the next page, my nafkim. Very nice that we conceptualize the Rambam counts it as as two mitzvahs. The Baha'i counts it as one mitzvah. Wonderful, wonderful, very nice. Say a shir in a yeshiva, and they'll appoint you as what would they call me over there in Toronto? The Skan Rosh Kollel. You said a good shir. We'll call you the Skan Rosh Kollel, or Dov. What's it called? Zichron. Do you remember that Kollel, Zichron Dov? I think it's still alive and well. Once in a while, I get an email from them. All right. Well, I'm trying to joke around, but I see, Bobby, you're not even laughing at all. Okay, you don't like my jokes. Am I insulted? Am I hurt? I'm just devastated, that's all. But otherwise, it's fine. So what happens now when I ask you, my nafkamina? Do you know when you put on tefillin, whether or not it's one mitzvah, shal yad and shal rosh, integrated into one whole, or it's two different mitzvahs? You never heard of such a hakira. And it doesn't interest you. Not because you're a boor and an amoritz, but because you want to know if it's a nafkamina. Tell me how it cuts ice, says the lawyers. And Rav Mursky here does an amazing amount of research. And he comes up with 3 nafkaminas to what we thought, and that's how I would have said it, is a purely abstract conceptual machlokes between the Rambam and the Bahag. Put it up there in the higher abstract worlds of logic, but there's no nafkamina. I want to start with the second nafkamina and change the order around, because I think the second nafkamina really drives it home, really gives us clarity as to why these 2 definitions of tefillin as either 1 or 2 mitzvahs really is fundamentally important in our life. The man put on his tefillin, shal rosh, shal yad, before alos hashachar. And now it's alos hashachar. 2 possibilities. Let him wait till alos hashachar, then make the bracha, and he's fine. Another possibility, with alos hashachar, he's got to take off his tefillin and put it on a second time. And the answer is, it depends. If you're going to go with the Bahag, we're talking about 1 mitzvah, then apparently, even in the case of tefillin shal yad, the mitzvah is to have the tefillin on you. And the ma'aseh mitzvah is secondary. And according to the Rambam, it could be that both tefillin shal yad and tefillin shal rosh are 1 mitzvah because they both require and emphasize the ma'aseh mitzvah. But the Rogat Sheva says no. He says the following: it all depends upon tefillin shal yad and tefillin shal rosh. With regard to tefillin shal yad, my friend, take off the tefillin and put it on a second time, because the essential mitzvah is ukshartem. And when did you tie the tefillin down to your body and don the tefillin? It was before the zman achiyuv. But in the case of tefillin shal rosh, where the mitzvah is not putting on the tefillin shal rosh, that's only shall I say, a means to an end. It's a technicality. Then leave the tefillin shal rosh on your body, and with alos hashachar, you makayim the mitzvah. Perfectly, ideally. Why do you have to take the tefillin shal rosh off? Fascinating nafkamina. And it mamish reminds me by sheer association to the famous Hakira about the mitzvah of ulekachtem lachem. Is the mitzvah lekicha or having the lulav in your hand? And the nafkamina is going to be if you picked up the lulav before alos hashachar. According to some poskim, with alos hashachar, you got to put the lulav down and take it up again. Other poskim say no, shake away. You don't have to put it down and take it up again. And it all depends how you define ulekachtem. And I think that's 2 drops of water. This is what we're learning here. I was very surprised that Hegyonei Halacha didn't footnote this. Another nafkamina. This one is a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more challenging. Nebuch, a man is not capable of actually putting his tefillin on his body. And we can think of many different cases. I don't want to go into the gory details. Let me give you a low-key case. He's got a cast on his right hand. He broke his arm, right? What does he do? He's got to get tefillin on his left arm. Obviously, he's going to need help from his friends, as the Beatles would say, a little help from my friends. You remember that? I'm really dating myself. You guys are so young, you probably never even heard of the Beatles. Okay. Anyway, so who is his friend? Who qualifies to put the tefillin on his arm when he can't do so himself? Could we ask a guy to do it? Can we ask an Isha to do it? Can we ask a cotton to do it? Can we ask a monkey to do it? It depends, according to the Rogachover, on Tefillin Shel Rosh and Tefillin Shel Yad. Tefillin Shel Yad, the Maisa Kshira, the Maisa Anocha is the essential mitzvah. That's the Gufa Shel Mitzvah. Only a Bar Chiyuva can be integrated into the entire entity of Tefillin Shel Yad to guarantee a Kshira. But in the case of Tefillin Shel Rosh, the placing the tefillin on your head is only a technicality. It's only a means to an end. It's a Heksher mitzvah. With regard to the Kshira of a Tefillin Shel Yad, I need a Gavra Bar Chiyuva. His act of Kshira, of Hanochas HaTefillin Al Yado, can be integrated into the mitzvah because he also is a Bar Chiyuva. But if it's an Isha, a Katan, etc., La Bar Chiyuva, their Maisa Hanocha is not recognized by the Torah. It's not legally a Maisa mitzvah. And therefore he has to forfeit the entire mitzvah. But in Tefillin Shel Rosh, where the essential mitzvah is not the Maisa Kshira, but having the tefillin on his head, then he can ask a monkey, pardon the expression, to put the tefillin on his head. Train a monkey. And now the Rogachover says the nafkamina between Shel Yad as a Maisa Kshira and Shel Rosh as Vahayu L'Tokavos Meinin Neflam is going to be the Nusach HaBruch. Now I'm assuming, and please tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm hoping I'm wrong, that everyone here today makes two brachas, one on the on Tefillin Shel Yad and on Tefillin Shel Rosh. Is that true? Anybody here today who only makes one bracha? Oh, Bruce makes one bracha.
I'm making one bracha because of a shiur the rabbi in my synagogue gave a year or two ago. You probably know the halacha much better than me, but he had gone through the discussion on it. So I, at that point, had switched from two brachot to one brachot.
So I'll tell you, Bruce, the honest truth is, I wouldn't deviate from the minhag of your forefathers if they had a minhag to make two brachas. If you're
well, they weren't so machmir, so it wasn't really that I was deviating.
I'm just saying, if you're a Baal Tshuva and you don't know, or there's no Masoros that you know of, then okay, the Rosh Yeshiva gave a shiur and he convinced you should make only one bracha, so you switch your minhag. But I wouldn't switch a minhag of us. In my case, for example,
my father and grandfather did not regularly put on tefillin.
Right. So in your case, I think you can, how should I say, be inspired and swept away by a shiur of a Rosh Yeshiva contemporary and change your minhag.
Yeah.
In my case, for example, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, maybe you know, but
I have a suspicion.
How many times in my life did I recite the bracha? Asher Kidshanu Mitzvos Mitzvah Al Mitzvahs Tefillin on the Tefillin Shel Rosh. Once in my life, very recently, by the way. There was no choice. I had to be mafsik after the Shel Yad, and I had to make another bracha on the Shel Rosh. For the first time in my life, I wanted to make a Shechiyonu on the bracha itself. Because I come from Lubavitch, and in Lubavitch we only make one bracha. It's based on the Admur Zaken. And most Faradim, by the way, will probably only make one bracha. But again, there are Chilukim and Hagim, and it all depends on the Machlokas, Rashi, and Rabbeinu Tam, which in Mitzvah Shem we can talk about a little bit later. But for those who make two brachas, or for me in the case where I have to make two brachas, because I was mafsik between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, why don't we anticipate that the Nusach HaBracha should be identical for both Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, especially in the light of the Shitas HaBahag, that it's all one mitzvah. Although according to the Bahag, I wonder and I doubt if he had two brachas. But let's say if we go according to the Rambam, who has two separate mitzvahs, look, or both brachas should be identical. Name, they're two different brachas. Says the Rogachover, I'll tell you why. Because in the case of Shel Yad, the mitzvah is what? Kshiro, kshartem. It's the Maisa Hanocha. And therefore you make a bracha on the Hanocha. But in the case of Shel Rosh, it's a whole different mitzvah. It's for Hayu. It's having the, wearing the Shel Rosh. And therefore it's our mitzvahs too. But now the question arises, why is the Nusach HaBracha on Shel Yad lehaniach. Does anybody have an alternative suggestion? If they would ever ask our opinion?
Likshar.
Likshar, it should have been Likshar. We always follow the nusach of the Bible in the brachos. The only exception I know of is lulav. I think we once discussed it here. Why do we make it al netilas lulav, not al lakichas lulav? And we quoted the famous chiddush of the Torah Tmima that the Medrash says that after the judgment of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the lulav is a flag that we wave to indicate that we won the right over the left. Okay, you asked me about politics, but that we won the din between Yaakov and Esau. So since the Medrash says notlim means to wave, actually. Like, for example, al netilas yadayim, the mitzvah is to wave your hand. But why in the case of tefillin do I make the bracha lehaniach tefillin instead of likshar es tefillin? And the one who addresses this question was the Bach, the Yoel Surkis, who lived almost 6 centuries ago in the city. He was the Rav of the city of Brisk, way before the Salvation. And this you'll see on the fourth.
So, I'm sorry, Rav. Again, with regards to this saying the 2 brachas, according to the ones who say just one bracha, they're going according to.
We'll get to that in just a minute. I'm just building up to that.
Okay.
But one thing I wanted to point out is, if you recite 2 brachas, why is the nusach bracha different?
Yeah. Okay.
And the Rugged Shover really falls into our lap over here, very smooth. It's like sliding into home plate, smooth. Why? Because the Rugged Shover says they're fundamentally 2 different mitzvahs. One is the Maisik Shira, and if you're making a bracha on the Maisik, it's Asher Kichon Lehaniach, whereas the Shel Rosh is only having the tefillin, and therefore it's what? Al mitzvah tefillin. But the question that the Bach addresses is a slightly different question, and that is, why is the nusach of the tefillin different than the Torah's nusach? Why la'aniach and not liksha? Just give me 1 second. I just want to make sure. Tony, the door, I left the door open. It's already 3 o'clock and she didn't come. I don't know what happened. Now, says the Bach. So again, this is page 148. So you have, I think, 4 pages. Am I correct? 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th page, I believe. I don't know, for some reason I didn't give you page 149. I don't think, did I?
You didn't give us 148.
So I made a mistake. I should have given you 149. But anyway, now we're on 148. And we're on the bottom of the page. And the Bach says the following. Sometimes the Chachamim, when they masakin the Nusach HaBracha, they want to teach us something halachic and avoid a possible pitfall and a mistake. And watch this. Very sharp move. The Torah says, "Ukshartem liosal yodecha," and we might mistakenly think that if the Torah commands us in the mitzvah of putting on the tefillin, then the very moment I put it on, I can take them off. Like in the case of "Ulekachtem lechem b'yom harishon," just take the lulav and put it down. That's it. You don't have to run around with the lulav the whole day. And the Bach says that that's inherently incorrect. The mitzvah of tefillin applies the whole day, and be'ikro shel davar lechatchila, the way the mitzvah should be fulfilled ideally, is wearing tefillin the whole day. My father told me about his grandfather, his maternal grandfather, who was his Rebbe back in Plisa in Lita. My father said he can't even think and imagine his grandfather without tefillin. He always wore tefillin. I mean, I think I told you once, the paradox is we have only one picture of Rabbi Yitzchak Sorkin, my maternal grandfather, and he's not wearing tefillin. So somebody went ahead and drew tefillin into the picture. But there's no tefillin. But the only answer that I could come up with, but maybe there's a better answer, is that this was a passport picture. And they didn't allow you to wear tefillin for your passport picture. I don't know. But that's the only photograph we have of my father's Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak Sorkin, his grandfather. And even to this day, you have Hasidim and even Sfaradim who are very, very pious and very Kabbalistic, and they want to get to the neshama. They will wear tefillin, I don't know if the whole day. My two grandsons, maybe they go back to their great-great-grandfather. Anyway, they wear tefillin the whole day in the old city. That's, if you know, the Zilberman Yeshiva. That's where all the boys wear tefillin the whole day. But the Bach says that in order to avoid this pitfall, this misunderstanding, Chazal changed, they altered the nusach of the bracha. Instead of kshira, which implies put it on and take it off, hanacha, because hanacha means that it should be munachim al gufa. Munachim al gufa. And truth be told, my opinion is that the Bach probably rejected the Rogatchover, and he held that even tefillin shel yad is an ongoing mitzvah of wearing the tefillin. And in order to avoid any pitfall in mistakenly thinking that the mitzvah of shel yad is putting on the tefillin, they changed the Chazal were masakin a different nusach, deviating from the biblical word kshira and using the word hanacha, which is like a shulchan shemunach olav, where things are on the table. Until you take them off, they're on the table. The tefillin shel yad are on your body until you take them off. But it's fascinating to me that the Maharal Prague, who lived probably about 400 years before the Rogatchover died in the 20th century, I think the Maharal is saying exactly what the Rogatchover is saying. Take a look on the top of this very page. The Maharal Prague says, Lama tiknu al shel rosh al mitzvah tefillin, the al shel yad lehaniach tefillin. Says the Maharal, Mishum de shel yad ksiv ukshartem lios al yodecha ukshira v'hanacha chadahi. So the word kshira is identical with the word hanacha. I mean, that's a leap of faith, but if you accept that, then since the mitzvah of shel yad is kshira, therefore lo aniach. But the shel rosh, says the Maharal Prague, shekosim bo v'hoyu v'hoyu l'totofos v'lo nizkar el loshen havaya, having the tefillin on your body, l'fichach shayich bei al mitzvahs tefillin. So if you ask me what's the nafkamina between tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh from the perspective of the Rogatchover, we have three nafkaminas now. We have the nafkamina about who can put the shel yad on your body. Not everyone can do that for you. We have the nafkamina of the nusach habracha, and the nafkamina of someone who put on his tefillin before alos hashach.
If you only have a shel rosh, what bracha do you make?
Excellent. Let's ask the following question, which is Bobby's question. When the Rogatchover defines, and probably the Maharal way before the Rogatchover, the mitzvah of shel rosh as v'hoyu, is he telling you that the pasuk of ukshartem does not apply to tefillin shel rosh? which means that there's no kshira with regard to Tefillin Shel Rosh. Or, alternatively, the word ukshartem goes on both Tefillin Shel Yad and Tefillin Shel Rosh. But the emphasis and the main primary definition of the essence of Tefillin Shel Rosh is Vahayu. But no doubt that there's a second dimension to the mitzvah of Tefillin Shel Rosh, and that's ukshartem. And let's flip it around the other way. In terms of the mitzvah of Tefillin Shel Yad, according to the Rogatchover, are we saying that there's only a mitzvah of kshira, tie it down and take it off? No. The Bach is absolutely correct. The mitzvah of Tefillin Shel Yad has two dimensions to it. It may be primarily and essentially the hanacha and the kshira, but no doubt that even the Tefillin Shel Yad has a second dimension of Vahayu. And I'll prove it to you. From a pasuk in Chumash, because in Sefer Shmos, in Parshas Bo, which I don't know if anyone here has the minhag of reading the Parshios either before or after you put on the Tefillin. Just make sure if you read it before, put on Tefillin that you already made Birkas HaTorah. So I should really pull out a siddur here. Does anybody have a siddur so I don't have to run around looking for one? And you'll see, I think it's in Parshas Bo, Perek Yud Gimel, Kadesh, which we recite for those who have that minhag before we put on the Tefillin. There it says, "V'hayu lachat lizikar al yodecha." No mention of ukshartem. You haven't?
Yo, Vayidber Adonai Moshe Lemor Kadesh. Oh, not. Oh. V'hayaki yivivach Adonai el Eretz HaKanani. And it goes on with the whole paragraph. And
Yeah, but I don't need the whole paragraph. Just find the Tefillin Shel Yad if you can, just to save us time. It should be about what? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Does anybody have a
Our
siddur?
board said, "Asadonai lead the Tzeitim Eritrein V'hayalach Ala Al Yedek."
Oh, there it is. V'hayu lachal li'os al yodecha. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
Bruce going, Mosif Gorea here. V'hayu lachal li'os al yodecha. V'hayu lachal. It doesn't say ukshartem. So you see that the word v'hayu applies to Tefillin Shel Yad as well. So therefore, when I get back to your question, Bobby, there's no doubt in my mind that the issue here about Tefillin is primary and secondary, the Ikar Mitzvah, but there are two dimensions to both Shel Yad and Shel Rosh. There's a fundamental difference between the two, as we saw all the nafkaminas that we mentioned, because primarily Shel Yad is Kshira and Shel Rosh is Vahayu. But both Tefillin Shel Yad having both Kshira and Vahayu, as we saw in the pasuk, and Tefillin Shel Rosh, which is also included in the Ukshartem at the beginning of the pasuk, but the Torah says Vahayu. So although the primary element and obligation is the Vahayu in the case of Shel Rosh, but nevertheless it also has a kiyum of Ukshartem. And here we get back to your question, Joe, from before, and maybe with
So what bracha do you make if you only have the Shel Rosh then?
so if you only have the Shel Rosh, then you'll make the bracha al mitzvah still, because the ikar of the mitzvah is al. But if you made a bracha of ukshartem, it would be meaningful. And on the flip side of it, let's say, for example, he was mafsik between the first bracha on the Shel Yad and the bracha of Al on the Shel Rosh. Many Rishonim Paskin, we'll have to look in Shulchan Aruch, that he should repeat the bracha of Laniach Tefillin on the Shel Rosh. And then he'll make two brachas on the Shel Rosh. So if he only has the Shel Rosh, according to that school of thought, he will recite two brachas. Laniach on the Maisa Nocha, which in biblical terms is Kshira, and Al mitzvah Tefillin on the Vahayu.
But maybe that's another reason for the Lahaniach, because Ukshartem, it's not really, as the Rav pointed out, there's no real kshara with the Shel Rosh. You can't use the term Ukshartem. It's not. You're not tying.
It means the Maisa Hanacha That's what we're saying.
So that's why you're using the lahaniach. You can say lahaniach. You're placing them. That's a good lashon. Wouldn't you not say that's a better lashon for if you're going to use it on the shel rosh? Would you not say that's a better lashon than
According to the Bach,
ukshartim?
you're asking if you accept the Bach that the choice of the word lahaniach is hanocha al, al yodo, or in the case of Rosh, al Rosh, so then adarabah, that bracha would be appropriate for the shel rosh. So then maybe the Bach would deny what I said, that if you only have tefillin shel rosh, you recite two brachas. I don't know. Maybe the Bach would argue that the bracha of lahaniach would cover both the Ma'aseh Hanocha and the Bahar. But I want to get back to one last point before I let you go. And that is the machlokes between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. And this is on page 149, which believe me, I'll send you for next week, because most of what we want to do here on page 149, we will not get to do today.
You sent us 149. You didn't send us 148.
Oh, I skipped a page. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. All right. So Rashi on the top of page 149 holds that there's only one bracha for both shel yad and shel rosh. Rabbeinu Tam holds that there are two brachas, one for shel yad and one for shel rosh. So he says the following. I'm not sure if he's quoting anyone. I don't know. He says the following. Rashi holds like the Bahag, that tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh are one mitzvah. Hence, we make one bracha. We don't give out extra bracha. However, Rabbeinu Tam, who has two brachos, he holds that there are two different mitzvahs, like we saw in Rabbeinu Tam, in the Rambam. But the Rambam counts, what was it, Yud Beis and Yud Gimel is shel rosh shel yad is two separate mitzvahs, therefore you need two brachos. But now we're in trouble. Because the Rambam is the one who says that you only make one bracha. And the Rambam is the one who counts tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh as two separate mitzvahs. So again, on the one hand, it's logically compelling to reduce the machlokas between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam to the machlokas between the Rambam and the Bahag. Namely, Rashi, who holds there's only one bracha, holds there's only one mitzvah like the Bahag, whereas Rabbeinu Tam, who has two brachas, would maintain, like the Rambam, that there are two separate mitzvahs. But yet the paradox is that the Rambam himself is the Rishon who waves the flag of reciting one bracha for both shel rosh and shel yad, and yet the Rambam is the one who says that we have two separate mitzvahs. So that's what I want to pick up for Neder next week, which I assume would be at 3:15 on my clock, just to make sure. All right, because you're going to change the clock. Okay, then. All right. Wishing you all a great week. Thank you so much.
Go ahead. I'm here.
You've been so quiet. I don't know.
Well, I didn't ask any questions, but I was listening.
Okay. So usually you're very active participant. Okay. All the best.